My grandma is 94. She lives in a retirement center here in town. And I was visiting with her a while back, and thinking about this coming up, I asked her about the ghosts in her life. Being an immensely practical old woman and a sound old Baptist, she said, "Don't be ridiculous, that's silly." But the man sitting next to us said, "Oh no, that's not silly." And he got up and wandered off down the hall. Well, he comes back a few minutes later, shuffling down the hall, carrying this file folder. He says, "No, here's your silly." Slaps it down and sits down. You know, I take it up and look at it. It's a collection of yellowed memos and accident reports and maintenance requests from the Pepsi bottling plant from the 50s. Well, I look at him. He's looking me expectantly with his lined face and bright eyes. I said, "Well, what's it about?" He said, "I wish I knew. 60 years on, I don't understand it. I know it was the worst few weeks of my life." "What happened?" "Well, it was just after the war, and I find myself back in Cedar Rapids, single, 20-some years old. I didn't know what to do with myself. I tried a couple of semesters at Co, but that wasn't for me. And I see in the Gazette that the Pepsi plant is looking at adding a third shift for one of its lines. Well, I led a platoon. Surely I could supervise a bunch of men filling bottles with pop." And so that's what I did. I show up July 6, 1952, ready to lead my men. Only they weren't men. It was a crew of women. Me and 6 women. Well, we spent the first week during the day learning how all the lines worked and figuring all that out. And at first Monday night, we show up outside the building at 11 o'clock at night. The 7 of us and the night watchman. And he opens the door and we head down a long, dark hallway. Lights coming on as we go down. The place is just stone silent. A big change from the daytime when everything's rattling and clanking. The quiet didn't last for long. As soon as we got the line up and running, the sound started to roll and echo back and forth off the empty walls. The line clanking along, the bottles rattling against each other. It was hard to hear anything. We've been going for a while. One of the girls, Vera Reen, she looks at me and says something, but I can't quite hear her over the noise. She leans in a little closer and she says, "It's chilly in here." I had noticed, but she was right. We should have been sweating. It was in the 90s outside. So be thankful it ain't hot. She got back to her work. And it went good for, a couple hours. And then I noticed the line started to rattle. In a way it was not supposed to. The bottles were starting to shake dangerously. And all of a sudden, Loretta Zeller, she screamed once, and the first bottle hit the floor. Followed by another, and then another after that. I got the line stopped real quick. All the girls were standing over by one side in kind of a little knot. I said, "Are you girls okay?" And Loretta Zeller, she says, "Well, who pushed me?" "One of you must have. That's why I screamed. It scared me. And then that bottle fell." Helen Swoboda, she was standing near the back. She said, well, I could have sworn somebody pushed me too when the bottles were going over. But I looked around and everybody was yelling and screaming. The conversation kind of died out after that. We got everything cleaned up and got back to work. And the rest of the day went okay. Next night we come in, I kind of teased Vera about the cold. I said, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. She said, no, Mr. Metcalf, I'd rather the hot. Cold, it wasn't just cold. What are you talking about? I don't know, I'm just being silly, I guess. I better wash the bottles, we don't want to repeat it yesterday. Well, they worked along, we've been at it for about 2 hours. When Loretta Zeller, she sneezes, and Vera looked at her and she said, "Bless you." And she stopped. The breath coming out of her mouth was white like late October. All down the line, the girls were watching as their breath just steamed out. And then over the rattle of the bottles and the clanking, we heard this tiny metallic sound. A bolt fell off of one of the nuts, and followed by another, and one whole end of the line went over. It was the end of the shift for the night. The next night, when we come in Thursday night, I get there, and all the girls are standing kind of over at the edge of the sidewalk looking up at the building. I said, "Come on, girls, the bottles won't fill themselves." When they hesitated, I said, "Come on, it's a bottling line. It ain't Dracula's castle." But I had to admit, as we walked down that hall flipping on light switches, the silence didn't feel completely neutral. Well, we get to working. And that next week, that's when the noise started. We'd been going for 10 or 20 minutes, and the noise comes in low and thrumming, barely audible above the clank and rattle of the machinery. But just at the right pitch, the girl said, to give you just a terrible headache. We looked all up and down the line, hunting for something wrong, but nobody could find anything. Loretta Zeller, she tightened a bolt, but that wasn't unusual. But when she tightened the bolt, not only did the noise not stop, it got louder. It rose up to this high, keening pitch. I swear, if I didn't know it to be mechanical, I would have sworn it to be a high, sustained wail. I mean, the girls kept complaining of headaches and dizziness, and Vera was physically ill. Once Vera was out, there weren't enough of us left to run the line. We shut things down. The silence kind of descended on the building, and we got out of there into the hot of the night. As we come back, the sound was only ever there. Every night, 10, 20 minutes in, that low thrumming began. The girls would complain of headaches. We couldn't keep a girl for more than a few days at a time. Vera, Helen, Loretta, they stuck around, but the rest of them, we never bothered to learn their names hardly. Monday night, we come in, and I noticed cracks in the floor along the base of the machine. I keep an eye on it. We get going. It had been a good night so far. We had nights like that occasionally. I hope this would be a good one. Vera and I had gone to the movies in the afternoon. But about 2 hours in, just as the noise was starting to move from the edge of hearing into headache territory, why the line began to shake. Those cracks in the floor, the bolts had worked themselves loose, holding the line in, and as the first bottle hit the ground, I shut down the line. Silence descended over the building like a pall. We could tell the building didn't want us there. It took a couple of days for maintenance to get the line back up and fixed again. They filled the cracks, but they just come back over the next few days. We were working. It was a Tuesday. And we'd been going for about 45 minutes when the noise starts. The new girls start looking around. One of them, Carol, she says, "What's that sound?" Helen's answer to her was curt. The three girls had pretty much stopped working. They were looking over the machine, and Loretta looked at him. She said, "Don't bother. There's nothing wrong with it." She picked up a crescent wrench. She said, "It just wants... I don't know what it wants. I just want it to stop." And she started to bang on the line. And what with her banging and the noise wailing away and the line starting to shake, things started to come loose. Several of the bolts just sheared straight off. One entire end of the line fell over. Bottles are falling everywhere, shattering, exploding. Suddenly the line is gone, and I'm back in France, and shells are exploding around me, and I fell on the floor, curled up in a ball. Loretta is screaming at the top of her lungs. Helen comes running over. Vera's trying to help, but she slipped in the wet, and the glass cuts her arms and her legs. As she started to scream, I came back to myself. I get up, I hit the stop line. It doesn't get quiet. Loretta's screams just echo. "Stop it! Make the noise stop!" When we finally get her calmed down, she doesn't remember any of it. It was 3 days before maintenance got the line back up again. That night started out like all the others, with line 3 misbehaving. We've been been going for a good 10 minutes. The noise started. Vera started to cry. I lost my temper. The line began to shake. I looked at the cracks in the floor. They were growing visibly. I mean, it was like a small earthquake. I started to lose my balance, and suddenly I realized I hadn't lost my balance. The floor was open, and there was like a sinkhole forming, and I started to fall. I screamed out. Vera tries to grab my hand, but I can't get it as the hole gets deeper and deeper, and I'm scrabbling, trying to get back up the dirt. Helen is screaming her lungs out, and Vera's found a pole, and she tries to get it down. I stop. For 2 seconds, the world is still, but the noise is so loud it drowns everything else out. And then the ground gives way again, and I'm falling and yelling until I thump onto something wooden. I stand there for one moment until the wood breaks. I scream as I fall, but it's only another foot or so. I look down, and there in the ruins of the wood, I can see something white. I kick the wood away, only to see a skull staring back up at me. As I scream and climb, clawing back up the dirt, my foot is stuck in the wood. I pull and pull, only to pull my foot out with the yellowed remains of someone's arm still clinging onto it. As I scream, clawing my way back up the dirt. It's the last thing I remember. Vera said I made it to the top with that skeletal hand still clutched around my ankle. That was it. That was the last night Vera, Loretta, Helen, or I worked at the plant. But 2 days later, the Gazette came out with a story. Yeah, the story said, a strange thing happened at the Pepsi bottling plant Wednesday night. Henry Metcalf at 1:15 fell into a sinkhole that had opened in the floor. A strange coincidence added a touch of the macabre, because he fell on top of remains left over from the old village cemetery. The cemetery had been moved in 1853, but there were remains that were forgotten. They have been uncovered from time to time in construction and road work, but rarely in such a dramatic fashion. 2 days later, another story came out. Readers will remember the incident a couple of nights ago where a sinkhole opening at the Pepsi bottling plant revealed remains from the old village cemetery. The remains had been identified as belonging to Magdala Swoboda. She and her husband emigrated from Bohemia in the 1840s. Mrs. Swoboda had come from a rural part of Bohemia and bore no love for the noise and busyness of city life, even a city as small as Cedar Rapids. Being poor, the only place that they had found was a small cottage hard alongside the mills below the dam. She quickly gained a reputation as a gadfly, complaining to Nicholas Brown and George Green and anyone else who would listen about the constant noise. In the spring of 1852, she took ill and lingered until the summer. Her last words to her husband were, "At least it will be quiet."